Hello and welcome to The Radical. I'm Christina.
And I'm Nicole. On our podcast, we delve into the roots of metaphysical wisdom.
That's right, Nicole. Our podcast is all about exploring those fundamental truths and practices that nourish your mind, body, and spirit.
Yes, Christina, we want to make metaphysical concepts easy to understand and accessible, especially for those who don't have a ton of time to do all the research.
Right? We'll do the research as well as share our experiences and perspectives, hoping to empower you, our listener, to find balance and magic in your day-to-day.
Inspired by the essence of the word radical, proceeding from the root, let's explore the roots of well-being and self-healing together.
This is The Radical with Christina and Nicole, two metaphysical girls in the material world. Hello, welcome to The Radical. I'm Christina.
And I'm Nicole.
Today our podcast is about Sedna, Lilith, and the power of feminine energy. We're going to start with some fast facts, some basics, some history, some scientific information. And then the second segment, we get into themes and feelings and some more interpretations. And segment 3, message from the universe. I've got my 3 cards right here from one of my favorite tarot decks. This is actually my travel tarot deck and travel tarot book. All right, let's just get right into it. I am at peak emotional rawness for this podcast, so let's get started.
I could say the same. So before we dive into our fast facts about dwarf planet Sedna and black moon Lilith, a quick note on feminine and masculine energy. This is kind of our disclaimer. And if you've been listening to our podcast, you have heard us explain before that feminine and masculine energy are really just names or descriptors for qualities of energy. Christina and I mostly stick with yin and yang, yin for the feminine, yang for masculine. I've heard it also said the feminine principle, the masculine principle as well. Carl Jung came up with the terms anima and animus.
And it's really taking the gender out of it. That these energies are not tied to gender. And every person needs to have an equal balance of both types of these energies. Every living thing has a balance of both these types of energies.
Exactly. I read a wonderful book in preparation for today's podcast, and the author of this book, her name's Jennifer Gell. She has a master's in health sciences, and she says this: while feminine energy governs life's mysteries and hidden potential, the masculine energy governs visible action. The expression of either to the exclusion of the other results in extreme polarization and projection, individually and collectively. And she goes on to explain how, astrologically speaking, this planet Sedna can help us resolve the issues around the feminine principle that we find in our culture and society today. One more note, in astrology, the sun is representative of archetypal masculine energy or the yang energy. The energy of the sun is representative of the individual's consciously directed will. So it's us directing our energy, taking action, whereas the moon is archetypal feminine or yin energy, governing that which is unconscious, unseen, habits, responses. So we'll kind of hang on to these notions as we go through the podcast today?
And that is at the core of this. Starting with Lilith as a mythological or historical figure. Everybody needs to do their own research on this, down to the basic beginning of where the name shows up in recorded history. Lilith appears in the book of Isaiah, the Babylonian Talmud, and there's incantations on bowls found in ancient Iraq and Iran. It's a deity or a energetic figure from those cultures. The medieval Jewish text, the Alphabet of Ben Sira, also describes Lilith as Adam's first wife. You may have heard that specifically with this character, but there's more to it than that. However, that Jewish text, isn't always considered authoritative source of Jewish literature. Just like all books, they were written by a human being. We have to do our research and our digging to find the answers that resonate with us. Lilith, in that context, is said to have been banished from the Garden of Eden for disobeying Adam and refusing to submit to him. She is sometimes portrayed as the original woman and was created from the same soil as Adam, as an equal. Going back to the archetypes that Nicole mentioned, with Lilith, at the core of what this character represents is yin. Water, earth, dark, wild, moon, cold, untamed, secretive, unknowable, unpredictable, chaos. That, in everything that I've read, scary energy, unknown energy, punishment energy is Lilith. That there's so much more to the story in the mythology of this character than what I would say just this wife of Adam situation. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the one that I found the most. Dig a little bit, listeners. There's a lot more there. And then, just like Nicole mentioned, again, we did our notes separately, but here we are talking about the same thing. And then my note, I have the archetype of the yang energy, the fire in the air, civilization, order, predictability, domestication, agriculture, crops. When humans are trying to make sense of nature, they assign qualities to what they know and what they don't know. And it seems to me that the quality of Lilith was the things that they didn't know. Today, as our understanding grows, and today as our information grows, this myth and this energy about Lilith being brought back up and being interpreted to mean what it means today in our modern astrology totally makes sense to me. To harness that and to take that information and add what we know now to that ancient myth, so you can see how it all came together, that we're actually talking about this today.
I felt that way with my research too. Yeah. Looking at the myth with modern eyes.
And I thought I knew what Lilith was, and I did not. Nico, I did not. I did not. And my brain is full of wanting to know more, wanting to understand more. And then also, I just needed to stare out my window for a good 10 to 15 minutes and think about how all this comes to be. Why do we have archetypes? Because nature isn't good or bad. It's almost neutral, because there's life and death. There's growth and decay. Man has assigned personalities to that energy. And that's what Lilith is. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about that, but I'm sure it'll come back up. So let's talk about, okay, so that was the mythology of Lilith. So now we come into our modern astrology interpretations. Black Moon Lilith also called the dark moon Lilith. It's like we said when we covered celestial bodies, it's not an actual object like a planet or an asteroid, but it's the empty space furthest from the Earth along the moon's orbital path, the literal dark side of the moon, the point representing the apogee of the moon's orbit. This represents in modern astrology aspects of the self, primal instincts, raw yin energy, the hidden, the chaotic, but you could also say the fertile, the intuitive aspects of the human condition. But it's a mathematical point in space, so we get scientific about it. It's a mathematical point in space that shows up on your birth chart in a certain place.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, wellness and exile, that's another theme of Lilith, is being exalted for not following the status quo. Something I didn't know about until I was doing my research is there's also what can be called a true black moon Lilith. Just like we have the Western or tropical astrology and we have the sidereal astrology, taking into account the precession of equinoxes, there's two ways to figure your black moon Lilith. One is the mean, and the second one is called the true. The mean black moon Lilith is the average calculation based on the moon's wobbly orbit, while the true calculation provides a precise position for a specific moment in time. That's just to help you know where to go if you see those two terms. The asteroid Lilith is an actual object in the sky. This is what we talked about in celestial bodies. I know so much more now than I did when we did that podcast, Nicole. And I was talking about the asteroid in I assumed a lot that I understood what was going on with the asteroid. Did not. Okay, the asteroid, 1181 Lilith. It takes 4 years and 4 months for it to orbit the sun. It's a metallic asteroid in the middle region of the asteroid belt. This little asteroid, was discovered in 1927 by a Russian-French astronomer, Benjamin Jakowski, or Jahowski. But this asteroid was named after a French composer, Lily Boulanger, and her full name was Lilith. So 1927, named for a very fascinating woman from French culture. If you look her up, she has a fascinating history. Not the mythological character of Lilith. This was named after a person, but it has been brought into this circle of dark feminine and feminine energy in astrology. So just know where the name came from and the history of the woman it was named for. And then you apply your own interpretations to that.
While you were explaining that, I had to open my birth chart to make sure that what I wrote down for Lilith in my birth chart was Black Moon Lilith and not Asteroid Lilith. And it is Black Moon Lilith. But I was like, oh no, did I get them mixed up? Because it is easy to assume it's the same.
I did. I totally did. And I just had a lot of assumptions on this. And one of the 4 agreements, don't assume.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I know. But I did make some big assumptions about the asteroid Lilith. And I'm happy to know the information, and I'm happy that we recognize it, and we recognize its energy and where it is in its history, but just know that as you're moving forward in your own interpretations.
Yeah. And some information on Sedna. Christina introduced Sedna to us in our Celestial Bodies podcast.
Let me do the science real quick. Listen, I'm not going to do all the science. I'm just going to do a little bit because it helps me. It has 11 3,400-year orbit around the sun. Isn't that amazing? It is the most distant solar object ever discovered. It is twice as far from the sun as any other solar system object and 3 times farther than Pluto or Neptune. And those are my exact notes from celestial bodies, but it means so much more now than it did then. And Sedna has a reddish color. That's a result of organic compounds called tholins. Complex molecules form when methane, water, and ammonia ice is exposed to the harsh radiation of space. So there is stuff happening on that beautiful little dwarf planet out there spinning in space. There is life on it.
Sedna was discovered in November 2003. One thing about Sedna, I love this since we're kind of focused on feminine energy and the power of feminine energy in this podcast. Up until Sedna's discovery in 2003, all planets fell within the Greco-Roman mythology in terms of getting their names. Up until this point, only 2 were considered to be of the feminine archetype, the moon and planet Venus. Since Sedna, we've had another feminine named planet, Eris, the goddess of discord and strife, but this is a Greco-Roman name. So Sedna stands apart in a second way. So the first being her name and sort of the mythological tradition she comes from. But if you get kind of really detailed into the celestial body classifications, there's actually a classification for Sedna herself. She is a dwarf planet, but then you can kind of get into trans-Neptunian objects. And again, there's a lot of classifications, but there's a classification called a sednoid because of how unique Sedna is. So she is standing apart in these ways. That really stuck out to me in her as one of her characteristics. In Sedna's discovery chart, which is, we've kind of talked about this before, you can do a natal chart for the discovery of a planet, the formation of a business. So in Sedna's discovery chart, her sun is in Scorpio, her moon is in Cancer, her rising sign is Leo. The Sedna myth comes to us from the Inuits, and Christina summarized the myth in our Celestial Bodies episode, but in a nutshell, Sedna was a young woman who turned away suitors. Finally, she marries, but the husband is not a good guy. Sedna's father comes to save her in a boat, but on their way home, there's a massive storm, and Sedna is thrown overboard by her father out of fear. And as she's clinging to the side of the boat, he chops off her fingers and she sinks to the bottom. As an Inuit goddess who is in charge of the sea animals, the sea mammals, and when she is really upset because she doesn't have fingers, it's usually because her hair is tangled, or there's one myth said crabs in her hair. And this brings us to a connection to shamanism. Sedna is super connected to shamanism, which, as described by the author of this book, the key component to shamanism is the ability to perceive reality beyond the physical plane and to retrieve wisdom from the great unknown. It was the shamans of the Inuit culture who would voyage down to the sea and help Sedna untangle her hair, make her happy again, and she would free the sea mammals so the people could eat. I love this tie to shamanism. So there's a couple things I want to reiterate from her myth. There's a theme of the betrayal and abandonment of the feminine by the masculine. Sedna's betrayal is the story of humanity's abandonment and annihilation of the feminine principle. So the myth it's two characters, a father and a daughter, but this myth is speaking to something that is relevant today to us.
Mm-hmm.
Shamanism is the alchemy or the transmutation of taking darkness and turning it into light. It is very closely tied to shadow work, healing, and integration. What's really fascinating about shamanism is archaeological evidence suggests this is a practice about 40,000 years old,
Mm.
making it one of the oldest forms of spirituality in the world. And I believe there is evidence of shamanism on basically every continent except Antarctica. Sedna is tied to other S words like sound, science, and spirit. Sound is a big part of shamanism as well. Sound can change our vibrational state. And so, for a shaman to do this ceremony, you do have drumming, chanting as part of a shamanic ritual or ceremony. So, that would have been part of appeasing Sedna. And because Sedna is so far away from the sun, her orbit ranges 71 to 870 billion miles. She's very, very cold.
Mm-hmm.
Minus 240 degrees Celsius, which is minus 400 Fahrenheit. So, Christina mentioned Sedna's tied to the water element. This book calls her a goddess of triple water. So, the huge impact of the water element. And let's see, what else do I want to say? Oh, because of how cold it is on planet Sedna, this ties in really nicely to her myth of being drowned in the Arctic Sea. But it also touches on other feminine principle or feminine energy characteristics. So, darkness, cool or cold, winter, the color black. Feminine energy is also nourishing and fertile. Like Christina said, it is associated with intuition, emotions, and connection. So, this is part of Sedna's myth, but also the feminine principle overall.
We were talking before this, and I said Lilith was earth and Sedna was water
Mm-hmm.
on such a basic level.
Mm-hmm.
The two yin elements.
To kick off segment 2, I want to go back to how Christina says it, the literal dark spot of the moon or dark side of the moon is
Yeah.
Black Moon Lilith. So we have this amazing theme just right out of the gates of darkness and light.
Mm-hmm.
Sedna is so far away from the sun, it's so cold, the planet, but then in myth, she's at the bottom of the ocean. And so that darkness and the unknown and not being able to see, I think, is what makes the feminine principle so scary.
It's unpredictable and it cannot be controlled.
Precisely. According to the scientific community, we only sense 5% of all reality. The rest is dark matter and dark energy.
Yep.
Darkness attracts light. Dark matter is considered yin, and light, just like the sun, is considered yang. The color black is associated with the water element in Chinese medicine, and fear is associated with the water element as well. And we've talked about shadow work and integration before. This is where we're working with the darkness in ourselves and bringing light to those dark places within us that need healing. And this is kind of what shamanism is as well. There's much more to shamanism, but that is a component for sure. So I loved this idea of how darkness attracts the light.
I I was deep in my research and I was distilling down yin and yang, and it's hard not to find the symbol. What's the yin and yang symbol? The black and white,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I did have a highlight there when it was talking about the four elements of Taoism. Is that it? Oh my goodness. That is a whole, like, we say that at least
Every
once.
time.
Yeah, at least once a recording. That's a whole nother podcast. And the key takeaway of the little bit that I read on it is that the importance, the extreme importance, the radical importance of the balance between the two, that you
Yes,
have both. Every living being has both, and we need balance between the two.
we do.
That's it. Yeah. The one thing that we mentioned at some point about Sedna was that Sedna is changing signs for the first time since 1966. It's moving into Gemini. I know we said that in one recording or another because you and I listened to a podcast on it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it just got me so excited and got my imagination going. And I'm like, I have to know more about Sedna. And to crack that open and now to be down the road of the dark feminine or the yin energy, the wild unknown creative or creator myths and energies and deities, and just distilling this down to what is hidden and what is seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you said, that what we see 5%. There's more unseen, and that is metaphysical.
Yes.
Most of
Yes.
that is energies. Most of that is mind over matter. Most of that is perceptions and intuition and listening to our bodies and meditation and just the worlds Nicole and I swim in. This is where we swim.
And it brings to mind the idea that we've talked about before, and we talked about it with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in regards to their discovery, kind of late in the astrological game, if you will. But it's this idea that we discovered these planets when we were ready,
Mm-hmm.
or these planets made themselves known to us when we were ready for the wisdom and the lessons that they bring.
Yeah.
Which is another theme of Sedna. What has been hidden, she brings to the surface. And this is, again, really linked to shamanism. This is linked to shadow work. We talked a lot about this in our Scorpio podcast, but generational trauma, lineage trauma, we can see that with Sedna's myth. Did you find anything with Lilith in terms of bringing forth that which is hidden or unseen?
Yeah. There's a lot of backstory to actually see Lilith as a human woman. I would say is a modern concept of what it represented a long time ago, was almost an otherworldly spirit. There's so much more that you can find on Lilith, but like all things, it evolves, and essentially it is scary, hidden. The energy was rejected. It could be a source of that if you are doing something or you're not where you're supposed to be, it's a way of control.
Mm-hmm.
It was a way to scare people into conformity. And then it gets, literal legs, and then it becomes a woman and was rejected by a community and rejected by man.
Mm.
So very similar to Sedna in that aspect, that she, because they're both, was betrayed and rejected by man and hurt
Mm-hmm.
and turned away and turned Sedna into the deepest depths of the ocean, and Lilith into the wild, into the earthly, wild, dark, scary places on the planet. And man put them there.
Like in the myth, the gendered man put them
Yes.
there. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. The yang put the yin
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we are human beings talking about human experiences. So, of course, they made them into human characters.
Mm-hmm.
But the energy and the story is older and deeper than that.
Yes.
Lilith is the shadow. Lilith is the shadow and the unknown and the scary and the wild and the unpredictable. That's the energy of Lilith.
It's like what the author of the book I read said. It's the abandonment and annihilation of the feminine
Mm-hmm.
principle.
And I love how I didn't hear that story, or I have a vague memory of it, about Sedna being angry about her hair. She's also angry. There's an anger there too.
Mm-hmm.
Not just this, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to be this benevolent, generous being.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's too simplified. That these are complex, emotional, energetic beings and
Mm-hmm.
and concepts that aren't good or bad. And they're not good or bad. It's just like nature is not good or bad. They are on the level of that.
And just that no emotion is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And Sedna can be very benevolent, but that's
Mm-hmm.
one side of the coin. She's a complex,
Yes.
multidimensional
Yes.
woman.
Yes.
And this may come as a shock to some people, but women get angry too.
That whole side, what is it? The left and the right side of the brain? That whole side, one side is rational, one side is irrational, for lack of a better term. We have both those sides. Some of us can just control it better than others, but we are both, well, both these energies. We are half of this energy. We are half of this Sedna
Mm-hmm.
Lilith energy. The
Right.
other half is the yang, the
Right.
sun and the fire and the air. But half of us is earth and water
Mm-hmm.
and complexity.
Yes. And that's for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of gender. So we do see in the Sedna myth and with Black Moon Lilith a theme of nonconformity, rejection, alienation, failing
Moodiness
to moodiness,
and
failing
punishment.
punishment, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of exiled alienation, getting rejected, pushed away. They're pushed away. And it's because they're failing to meet somebody else's
Yeah.
expectations that they are then shoved off a boat and left to drown.
Or turned out into the woods
Mm-hmm.
and has to live in the places that nobody else wants to live in, which is
Mm-hmm.
the Lilith story. To be turned out of civilized society.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they represent. And you could see that, tying it to the mythology, tying it to the history and the interpretations and thousands of years of people talking about this and writing about it and experiencing it and sharing that's where we get modern astrology today, is people have been interpreting, sharing, and experiencing their interactions with these energies. And that's why we have it today.
One of the final themes, unless something else comes to mind, we can't have darkness without the light, and we can't have butterflies without the cocoon phase. And you can't have healing if you don't have anything to heal from. And I think a lot of this alienation, this feeling of being alone or not accepted, is because we live in a culture that is fearful and afraid of dark feminine expression. And there is an expectation for us to be happy, pretty, of a certain weight. There are certain behaviors that are expected of us. We're supposed to smile at people when we're out in the world. We're supposed to be friendly,
Oh, and
polite.
smile on demand.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen.
So society wants one side of the coin from us. The sunshiny, happy, put together,
Predictable.
predictable, polite, docile, easy to manage. This patriarchal culture wants the healed version of you. It's like that's what they're asking of women. But then when you're angry, crying, and going through it, it's like that's almost the part that gets that dark feminine, that raw expression, the darkness, the fear, all those things that make up a healing process in part. It's almost like that is what gets rejected.
We're talking about, because we're human beings, we are talking about a human experience. And there's the element of suppression of a complex nature done by women, but there is also a suppression of a complex nature done by men. That the pressure for conformity and predictability and being like everybody else is a way of suppressing the complex, dark, emotional, intuitive parts of themselves as well. When will we be in a place where each human can fully express themselves and all of their nature and all of their emotions and all of their thoughts and dreams and desires? Has that and will that ever exist? I haven't seen it.
There is hope with Sedna moving closer that there will be more power. I don't know if I want to use the word power. Maybe more respect given to this darker feminine energy, more acceptance. And maybe it is power, because if 5% is what we can witness and see, and 95% is the unknown and what we cannot see, that is kind of powerful.
Is it another cultural shift happening where we're going to try a different way of living? Is that a growing understanding and awakening? It's going to be a big year, 2025.
It is going to be a big year. This has been something we have been talking about, not just on the podcast, but with each other. How do we put into practice our values? And how do we live authentically? How do we express ourselves and be who we are as women? But also, because we're women, how do we make sure? Because I can tell you that 5-7 years ago, the way I was operating was mostly yang. So how do I reclaim my yin essence? And Christina made a great point. You can identify as a gendered male and still have a need, maybe even more so, to reclaim your yin essence because we are a yang dominated culture.
Mm-hmm.
But what metaphysics and what spirituality says is we want to have our balance of both.
Think I still have a lot of sun in me, a lot of yang. I have a lot of that. And honestly, to do the research and to talk about Lilith and Sedna as energetic examples of being complex and being flawed, that the scariest people I have ever been around were people ruled by their yin emotions,
Mm.
because they are the most unpredictable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about this, that there's personality types that don't make you feel safe. And for me, it was the people who were ruled by emotions because I did not understand them.
Mm-hmm. They were a mirror showing you where you
Right?
felt uncomfortable.
Right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
can be in this place and I can tell you, my friend Nicole, and you, our beautiful listeners, that, and I'm on a path, and I've been on this path, and I'm still in this place, but now I recognize it. Now I know I need to swim in my yin self. Even though that water, yeah, that scares me. I am scared of that water. I
Mm-hmm.
do not want to go swimming.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the journey. You can be
Mm-hmm.
on this healing path for years, and now I can say that out loud. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not healed. I'm not fixed, in quotation marks. I can just say it out loud that I see where I need to change. There you go. That's the big revelation for today.
I'll tell you something real. I was scared of that place, the unknown, the dark, deep, black waters of the
Yeah.
unseen feminine energy. And you know why I was so scared of it? I was afraid I was going to get stuck there and never be able to come back.
Oh.
Like it would take me over, like it would drown me the way Sedna was drowned. That
Oh.
was my fear, that the water would,
Overpower you.
yes, and
Is
just
that
take
my
me.
fear? That I'm afraid I won't. Hey, I do have a very healthy fear of drowning.
There's something to it because when you are in uncharted emotional territory, it can feel very daunting and it can feel like it's going to just sweep you away
Yeah.
and you're going to like just be washed away with it.
Okay. This seems like a really good segue to talk about where these elements are in our birth charts. Did you see what mine are? Don't look now. I want you to be
Okay.
surprised when you find
Okay.
my black, because we just
Okay.
had this whole conversation, and this is a new piece of information for me. So I didn't remember it until I looked at my notes. So so Sedna,
Sedna for me
isn't it the
is,
same for both of us?
it most likely is. My when I was born, based on my birth time and place, Sedna was located in Taurus, the sign of Taurus, and she was also in the 6th house. And my birth charts default to the Placidus system for the house numbering. The themes for Taurus 6th house placement for Sedna: deep healing, resilience, addressing long-standing pain, unresolved patterns. And because it's the 6th house, the expression or kind of the stage on which this plays out It's going to be daily routines, health, my work environment, and service to others, which makes sense to me.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to do it with Taurus. There's sort of this practical, slow and steady type approach. And I feel that it makes so much sense to me that this is where Sedna is in my chart.
So I'm still a pretty solid novice, and what the research and the places that I went to find this, I wrote Taurus with a question mark. I don't have I probably need to talk to you offline, Nicole, about where you got this specific information because I was looking in a very different place. But I'm pretty sure it's the same for us because Sedna was in Taurus since 1966, right? With a little dip in Gemini last year or the year before that or something, if I remember the podcast I listened to on Sedna. But as part of my journey in trying to find out this information, I went to a lovely website that gave me my sidereal or sidereal astrology chart. Listeners, don't look at that unless you are ready to go down another rabbit hole, because that is your chart placements without taking into consideration the precession of the equinoxes, which is that the earth rotates on its axis, but it also wobbles a little bit, like you know how the moon kind of pulls it in one direction or the other, so that the sun isn't always in the sign that you were born in tropical or Western astrology. So I saw mine and I'm like, I am not ready for this, and just clicked it. I took a picture of it and then I just clicked it off. I'm going to look at that later. And that's what side railed me from looking at my Sedna. But I do believe that it is Taurus. I think that it is our generation, me and you, Nicole, and our generation is Sedna and Taurus, which totally makes sense. Um, a very earthy, grounded, maybe not as energetically in our healing journeys. Maybe we were working a little too hard and focusing on, you know what I mean? Like there wasn't a lot of dynamic change in this in our generation. Do you think? I think it's gonna become with Sedna and Gemini. I think things are gonna start popping off. But maybe our generation, we were a little more slow and steady.
Black Moon Lilith in my chart, she was in Gemini in the 8th house.
Gemini. Okay,
So,
Lilith and Gemini. Okay, that's a lot.
so this can be seen as if somebody has this placement having a fascination with the unknown
Mm-hmm.
and hidden aspects of life. And therefore, it may lead you towards occult studies and healing practices.
Oh, I like it.
That sounds like a 100% accurate description for me. But I love the hidden, the occult. Like this theme keeps going, the unseen.
And the expression and the study of that, because it's Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
How about that? All right, my Black Moon Lilith is Pisces.
Water sign.
It's kind of like my North Node being in Scorpio. Nothing scares me more than going for a swim in
Mm-hmm.
my emotions. I wrote down, I don't know what house it's in because where I was didn't tell me that, but I typed in the degrees that it gave me so that I can look it up. But this is artistic and sensitive. It says you might live in your imagination and express themselves through emotions. That's not me. But you can see how this is my Black Moon Lilith, which is my shadow side, which is where I am not I'm not expressing as much as I should. The artistic and sensitive, spiritual, romantic, naive, especially optimistic in relationships, and intuitive. So I have that. Um, I do love to live in my imagination. I've said this recently that I wanted a richer internal world. Have you ever, I've said that recently to somebody when I was talking about wanting to meditate more, is that sometimes we're in the material world and I like to have time to daydream.
Mm-hmm.
I need daydreaming time. I want a rich internal imaginative fairy tale fantasy kind of
Yeah.
daydream
Like how
situation.
you
And
were
I,
staring out your window.
yes, yes, yes. So, so much being revealed to me about my birth chart. I wouldn't have told you at all. There was no water anywhere in my chart. And that's what you'll see if you look at some of my birth charts that just do the main ones, right? Like the main planets and the big three, even to the point where Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune aren't given as much weight, shall we say. But now we have different elements that have been revealed to us that give us more deeper understanding and reveal watery sides of us and
Yeah.
airy sides for you and your Gemini that
Yeah.
are absolutely terrifying.
I do just want to say if you are somebody who related to feeling like you'll get stuck in your emotional waters, when I feel overwhelmed with emotion, it feels very real that I could get stuck there. You can kind of be your own lifeguard and remind yourself that it is temporary. You can even write yourself a note on a piece of paper. And if you find yourself in that place where this feels so big and possibly permanent, because you're just really immersed in the water in that moment, then you have your little lifeguard note to self that this is temporary. You've made it through before. You'll make it
Mm-hmm.
through again. It's temporary.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. We have to be our own lifeguards.
Mm-hmm. And you know it's temporary because everything is.
Yes.
And there are no exceptions to
Yes.
that. Not even you and this feeling you have. Everything is temporary.
We have to we have to visit the message from the universe.
We do.
I've got the book in my hands. I know what the cards are, and I'm very excited to read them after our discussion. But I have three cards today, and usually I only have two, but I have three today because that was uh, what was meant to be. So you pick A, B, or C. A, B, or C. Okay. Card A, the High Priestess, mystery and psychic wisdom. The High Priestess sits in stillness. From there, she's able to access realms others pass by without noticing. The vast world of intuition, dreams, and mystery. She uses silence and non action to harness this power. Sometimes this card appears to remind you to listen more closely to the voice within. Other times, it's a sign to look past the obvious, to find what's being kept secret or hidden within a given situation. Acknowledge the shadows.
Hmm.
She was with us the whole time.
Yes.
Okay. Card B, Six of Pentacles, prosperity, growth, and generosity. The Six of Pentacles indicates that your long-awaited fruits are ready for harvesting, bringing more wealth than anticipated. Make sure you are generous during this bountiful time. This card can also signify generosity coming from someone else. If this is the case, accept the help with grace and put the resources to good use. Beautiful card. And C, Ace of Pentacles, prosperous beginnings. In the center In the center of even the giant redwood trees, a tiny seedling once stood. Such is the energy of the Ace of Pentacles. It's the seed that takes root, grounding you for the future. You are in the beginning phases of a prosperous venture. Stay grounded, go outside, and take time to appreciate nature. You may also find a windfall of wealth headed your way.
Okay, I accept.
We accept. Thank you very much, universe.
Thank you, universe. Thanks for teaching us about Black Moon Lilith, Tina.
Whew, that was a lot. It was a lot, and it was so good. And don't make assumptions. Do the research, get your questions answered, follow your thought patterns down rabbit holes, and enjoy the process. Oh my gosh, so much good stuff.
Thank you, listeners. We will talk to you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Radical. The Radical is written and produced by Nicole and Christina.
Listener questions can be emailed to us at theradicalpodnc@gmail.com.
Our Instagram is The Radical Pod.
Music by Van Horton. His Instagram is Van Horton Music.